So let's talk about those constructors. What is a constructor? Actually, you've been using constructor for a long time, but you were not realizing that because, well, we did not tell you that. We just, every time we were using a scanner, an instance of a scanner, we were calling a constructor. So what is a constructor? And let me give you that definition with this example. Remember when we used to create a student from a class student. So the object S is from this data type, and then we always use this like that. And we told you, well, this is how we should do it. Okay? Well, what we do here is call the constructor. And this is, okay, meant this. And this is the constructor. As you notice, this is a method. So a constructor is a method, but it's a special method. This special method has some characteristics, and the main characteristic of that method, which is a constructor, is that it has the same name than the class. So a constructor is a method that has the same name of the class. If the name is different, this is not a constructor. So this is the constructor, and we say that it has the same name of the class. This is one of the main properties of a constructor. So what does a constructor do? Actually, a constructor initializes all the instance variables. Initialize all instance variables means we are going to be putting some initial values into all those variables. So if we have a look at this example again, now this class student has 3 instance variables. When I'm calling this new student between parentheses, actually what is going to happen, default initial values are going to be put into those variables. For an int or a double, what is the default initial value? 0. For string, empty, something like that. Actually it's null, but for the string it is empty. It's either empty or null. I think it is empty in Java. So if you look at this class over here, this class definition, I did not put myself the code of the constructor. So if I don't put myself the code of that constructor, Java will give me one by default. That's what we were using up to now. We were just creating a class, and then we use that class and we instantiate that class with this new and the same name of the class between parentheses, and then we put nothing between the parentheses and then a semicolon. Why? Because by default Java is going to give us 1 if we don't have 1 already. So now what we are going to be doing, we are going to be putting our own default values. We are going to be customizing our constructors. Again, the main role of a constructor is to put initial values in the instance variables, which will result in having the preparation of that class being made by the constructor. What I mean with preparation, whatever I need to be doing before I start using that class. So I put the initial values if I want. If I need to do some processing, I can put it as well in the constructor. So the constructor is the first method that is ever executed in your class. If you have one, you can the compiler is going to execute the one that you have selected. If you do not have one, well, Java is going to give you one anyways, with putting default values into your instance variables. For some primitive data types, they're going to be putting some default values, like probably zeros. For class data types, it is mainly going to be null. It is going to be null. Okay. So if I'm doing something like this, check this example. with the previous class that was made, output details will display the content of the ID and then the name and GPA, which are those variables over there. Okay, so my question is this one. What would happen if I just execute this line, which just prepares the class, prepares the object S from the class student, and then right away I am displaying output details without me putting any values inside of those variables ID, name and GPA? What do you expect to be the output of this? The default values, the zeros. Actually here I'm not going to see this, I'm going to see just this empty. It is just showing you these double quotes just to tell you that this is a string which is empty, but actually you're not going to see anything because there's nothing to see, there's nothing in the string. So this is actually the output. Okay, so now you can see that this is inside of those variables, and this is what you see in the output. ID column, and then this 0, which is the ID, and then the name, there's nothing is going to be displayed because there's nothing, and so forth and so on. So again, we said that the main job is to initialize the instance variables, and we can initialize those instance variables by doing something like this. Very simple. I put my own values in the constructor, so I can have a fast way of putting the values inside my instance variables. And notice that we have the same data types, and okay, this order is the same order. It doesn't have to be the same order of how they are declared, but it happened to be like this. But you understand that whatever it's in I is going to go to the ID, whatever it's in N to the name, and whatever is in G to the GPA. So now in this scenario, we're having this class definition. If I am going to call that, let me go back to this example later on. Just like to see this. If I'm calling this new student with those values, what is going to happen? This is going to go for to the ID, inside of the ID, and this is going for the name, and this is going inside of GPA. So this is what is going to be happening. This is the output that I should expect. Okay, just to go back to this, I think we've spoken about this earlier, probably last week, when we were, or maybe before that, when we have the same names in the parameters than those in the class, to distinguish between which one is from the class from which one is from the parameter, we need to use this, the keyword this. If I don't use this, then there's something that is going to be, for us, maybe an ambiguity, but for the compiler it's quite clear. What I'm doing, I'm taking this ID, whatever it's inside of it, and I'm putting inside of the same ID, the same red ID, this one, the parameter one. So this becomes the parameter. Take whatever it's in. It's like if you declare int a, and then you put inside of that a, sorry, that's not, well, imagine that this is an equal sign. You put inside of that a1, and then what happens if you put as a statement a equal a? Which means take whatever it's inside of A and put it inside of A. Well, you did nothing but just give the computer some useless work. So this is the thing that would happen if you don't use this. And this is a special case where it is only used when the parameter name is the same, is exactly the same as of the instance variable. Alright? Do you have any questions? So this is quite simple, but you need just to understand that every time if I need a constructor, if I need to put some initial values, I can use the constructor, which is a handy way of putting initial values inside of your instance variables. This being said, let's get some into more information about those constructors. We said if there is no constructor, then a no argument constructor is automatically provided by Java. But what happens if you have a constructor which takes some arguments or some parameters? Then the no argument constructor is not provided anymore. What I'd like you to understand from this is, if look at this example. In this class, I have only one constructor that takes those three parameters, three arguments, int, string, and double, and then put them in the instance variables. But I do not have a constructor that takes no arguments. So imagine that I'm using the constructor without this. I'm just opening the parentheses, closing it, and then semicolon. Do you think the output is going to be like the zeros and the empty? No. If you try to run this program, it is going to give you an error while trying to compile it. Why? Because it will tell you, well, excuse me, you said that you have a constructor that takes no arguments, but while looking at your code, I don't see one. Because you have specifically added a constructor, which is not the one that has no arguments. So it's very important to understand that if you have your own constructor that has more than one argument, then you're not allowed to use that one with the no arguments. If you want that in your class, well, you have to create it, to define it yourself. You have to go for this public constructor, the student. And remember, what happens to student is, the constructor is a special method, which means overloading happens to be possible with it as well. So I can do something, I put some code in here, and that's it. Well, that's not a very weird way to write, but anyways, you got my point, I hope. So if you have that, if you define your own constructor with more arguments, then you're not allowed to use the default one that was provided by default by Java anymore. So you have to give, if you like it, then you have to program it yourself. Just type the code for that yourself. So that's it. If there's a constructor in the class, then no argument constructor is the no argument constructor is not provided anymore. So we said when you call a constructor, this is the same rule that applies when you call a method. And one thing I'd like you to understand as well, to realize, is that the constructor does not have a return data type. Did you realize that? There's no void, there's no double, int, whatever, string, anything. We do not return anything in here. We just put public and then write away the name of the class, and then I'm just focusing on the parameters. There's no return data type. I cannot have a the constructor does not return anything. Yeah, this is an invalid call, of course. Remember, this is the same problem that we had with methods that we've seen last lecture. Remember? Why is that a problem? The order, we have all a string, an int, and the double, but the problem is that the order is not right. So we should start with the int, and then the string, and then the double. Okay, what about this one? This one seems correct, because this is an int going there, and this is a string going to the string, but hey, I missed something. It needs a third one, and I don't have a third one. So this is invalid. This is not possible. What about this one? Valid? Invalid? Why is it invalid? Because this is an int going into an int, a string going into a string, and an int going to double. And that's a problem? That's not a problem. It is going to be converted, typecast. and this is not a problem. So this is a valid call, even if this is an int. But since the parameter's data type is double, an int can be put inside of a double, while the opposite is not true. I cannot put a double inside of an int, but an int inside of a double, this is permissible. So this is a valid constructor call. So we said that constructors can be overloaded, so I can have a constructor that takes like 3 arguments, another one that takes 2, and I can just customize the constructors depending on my needs. So I'm the one who decides how many parameters, I mean how many arguments my constructor will accept, and how many constructors will I have. So when I'm designing a class, when I said me, I'm the class designer, I am the one who decides how many constructors are going to be useful. I need some time just to put the name, and then just the ID and name, and then the GPA, I don't have it, so I don't need to put 0 myself. I can just put define a constructor that takes only 2 arguments. Well, the first one is an int as an ID, and the second one a name, and the GPA is going to be by default 0 anyways. So I'm the one who is going to be choosing that. Of course, if you work in a team and you are a programmer in a team, then the analyst programmer is going to assign those things to you. It goes to tell you, okay, I would like you to design this class with these instance variables. This one is private, that one is public, and I would like to have like 2 constructors, one constructor that takes this, and that, another one that takes that, and so on, just to give you the specifications that you have to respect. But for you now, you understand that a constructor is like a special method that has the same name as the class. It has no return data type, and then if I don't define one in my class, one is going to be defined by default. And if I'd like to define my own, I can. I just need to give it the parameters, or maybe not give it the parameters, give it the statements that it needs to be doing. But the constructor is the first method that is called when you declare and initialize and instantiate your object from the class. So in this case, what is going to happen if I display that? I mean, the S1 is going to be having those values inside of it, and the S2 those values with the GPA 0, because I did not specify any GPA, and I call this second constructor that takes only 2 arguments, and that second constructor that takes only 2 arguments is putting a 0 in the GPA. This is the one that takes 2 arguments, and it's taking the 0, put 0 in GPA. Okay. So this is going to be the output of those. The first, this is S1, and this is S2. Okay, so this is it about the constructors. I'm going to be talking now about 2 very special methods that we need to be working with if we are working with objects, like classes that we now are going to be working with. So the purpose of the equal method, which is to compare between 2 objects. But the way you compare between 2 numbers is different from the way between you compare 2 students. So how do you compare between 2 students? Well, for example, you need to check if the ID is the same and the name is the same, then probably this is the same student, or these 2 objects are about the same thing. Or I might say, no, I just want like the same ID and the same name and the same GPA. Or maybe I will decide, me, the class designer, I will decide that, okay, I just need just to check if the ID of the first one is equal to the ID of the second one. Then I'm going to say, well, these 2 objects are the same, are equal, even if the names are different, whatever, the GPA is different. Or maybe I'm just going to do any rule that I'd like to be doing. So I'm going to be deciding which criteria will determine if 2 objects are equal. For numbers, that's quite easy to compare, because they have to be the same value. But for objects, I need to define my own way how to compare them. And this is the role of this equal. Remember, we've been talking about this equal with strings. When we were talking about when you'd like to compare two strings, do not use the double equal sign, because the double equal sign is going to compare the address in the memory of the first one and the second one. You remember that talk? So now, because string is an object from a class, string is a class data type. Now this equals, it can be adapted, and we can adapt it to our own classes in order to compare between those classes. So, for example, this is one way to compare a student with another student. So this is a method which returns a Boolean that can be either true or false, and takes what is the data type of that argument? Student. And let's see what it is going to be returning. It returns something interesting. It is comparing three things. The first one, the second one, and the third one. So is this true if ID of this class is equal to other.id? This is an int compared to an int. That's why I'm using this double equal sign. So if this is true, then I'm going to check this. This is an AND. And it's going to be true only if all of them are true? Yes. The AND is going to return true only if all of those parts are going to be true. That means if one of them is false, everything is going to be false. So if the ID is different, then no need to check the rest, because you remember this has a name. When I use two instead of just one, two signs of this AND, this has a name, remember? Remember that there is a difference between if I'm using only one or two.
The one will skip even if it's false.
The one will?
If it was false,
It is going to check. Very good. If I'm using only one, if this is false, even with an AND, one false is enough to make everything false. If I'm putting only one as the AND, then it is going to check even if this is false. No worries, I'm going to keep going and check the other one. And this is another one with just only one. Okay, just keep going and check the only one, even if only one of the first one was false, and then I didn't have to. But when I'm doing this, I'm forcing to check all the rest. When I'm doing this, I'm doing the short circuit operator, which means if one is false and I'm in the end, that's it. I'm not going to evaluate the rest. So in this case, I'm writing a specific way to compare between two students. In this scenario, I just would like to say true only if the ID is the same, the name is the same. Did you notice that we used equals? Because we're comparing a string with another string. And then the GPA is a double, so we can compare the GPA right away with the double equal sign. And that's very important to realize that we cannot use the double equal sign for comparing objects, because they're comparing the addresses when you use the double equal sign. And let's see some examples. Take some time, check this code, tell me what is the output of this. So we have 4 lines. I just would like you to realize that those 4 lines are going to be displaying Boolean values, either true or false. So we have 3 Boolean values, because this is just, is this S3 equal to S1? If it's true, it is going to be displayed as true as the 4th test. If this is false, it's going to be false. So What are your answers? All are going to be true? So true, 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 true. Somebody else has something different? Everybody agrees?
Maybe the second one is false. Maybe the rest is.
The second one is false. So we have true, false, true, true. Now you have to vote. Which one goes for number 1? Number 2? Someone has some other alternatives? I don't know. We never know. Number 1? Let's compare. Let's keep your answers here. Maybe you're going to compare. When I'm doing this S1 equal new student, and then with this ID, name, and GPA, S2, now when I'm declaring S2, is it going to be the same address? I mean, this S1 is the same as S2? No, it won't be the same. So the S1 is this one that has this 2, whatever, the ID, and then Ali, the name, and then 2.8. And then I have S2, which is another, it takes another space in the memory, another address with the same values. It just happens like to be the same values to whatever, and then Ali, and 2.8. So they have the same values, but I did not use the a dot equals. I was using the 2 double equal sign, which means it is going to compare the addresses. Is this address, is this exactly the same as the other address? Well, no. This is going to be false. Let me just erase this. So this is S1, and this is S2, and S3 is the same address of S2, because I said whatever it's in S2, put it in S3. That means these two are pointing to the same thing. So now, what would be your answers? Is S1 equal, is the address of S1 equal to the address of S2? So this is going to be false. Is S1 equals to S2, which means by looking is the same ID, same name, same GPA? So this is going to be true. Is S2 has does S2 has the same address as S3? Yes, so this is going to be true. Is S3 having the same address as S1? False. Now you got the answers right. Excuse me?
Please just can you repeat the point?
Which one?
S1 is not equal to
S2? Because the address of this S1 is different from the address of that S2, because they take 2 different spaces in the memory. They have different addresses. And since they have different addresses, if I'm using this double equal sign, you just check, is the address of S1 the same as the address of S2? So in this case, they are not in the same, because they're not. It's not the same address, because there are some different parts in the memory. That's why also this is equal. Why? Because I have put whatever it's in S2, I have put it in S3. So they have the same address. That's why actually this is true, because they have the same address. While these ones do not have the same address, even if they have the same values inside of their instance variables, but they are completely separate, different objects. While S3 and S2 are exactly the same object, just they have 2 names. So this is the difference between when I'm doing something with this new student, that means I'm going to take a new space in the memory. If I'm not doing the new student or new something, that means I'm going just to take the same address and just link to it. So that's why we have false for the first one, true for the second one, true for the third one because they have the same memory, and then false for the last one. Yes?
We can use new address and same value by doing the clone copy.
Well, you can clone, but then whenever you clone, it's only the values that you're cloning. But then you have to define your own cloning, I think. Alaikum salam. So this is about the equals. The other one is the toString, and this is the last thing that I'm going to be talking about before letting you go into some exercises, just to make sure that we understand all this. So the toString is a very special method that allows us to display the content of an object when we put it like this. Like if we'd like to see whatever this object is, we can customize how it will look like. Okay, maybe let me see if I have an example without. Okay, let me show you this. I'm going to show you that, I'm going to start Discord. I'm going to start NetBeans just to have a very simple way on seeing the difference between a toString when we have the toString on and when we do not have that toString. So if I'm doing something like this without defining a method toString, what would be the output? What would be the output of this? What should I see on the screen? Yes? Very good. I'm going to see the address of S. I'm not going to see the ID. I'm not going to see the name. I'm not going to see the GPA. I'm going to see the address of that S, because by default S is not a primitive data type. That's why when you put S, you're not going to see just one value. S has many different components. It has 3 instance variables. Which one should it display? Well, you have to decide, and if you would like to decide to which one you'd like to display, you have to write your own toString. But by default, this is going just to display the address, and this is what I would like to show you. Let me just close this, and let's close this one. Welcome, sir. Let's create a new one. Java project. Next, and let's name it testing toString. I'm going to create another class that I'm going to call student, just for the purpose of this, and let's use this private int ID, private string name, and private double GPA. You remember with NetBeans I can do this interesting thing, which is creating the accessors and mutators. Remember the accessors and mutators? What is an accessor? Sorry? What is an accessor? It allows you to display the content, or to get the content of the instance variables. And the mutators allow you to change the content or write some information inside of those variables. So which ones are the get and which ones are the set methods? The setters are
Mutator.
mutators because they allow you to change. So set, I'm using set something. The get something is the accessors because they allow you to get that access to that information. So don't forget that. Okay, so this is output details. I think I have the class somewhere, but anyways, this is. So I'm going to display ID plus ID plus name plus name, and then GPA plus GPA. Okay, I'm going to click on the refactor and then there's this encapsulate fields. I am going to select them all because I would like to have this get ID, set ID, and all of them. Let's refactor, and then you're going to see that I have all this get ID, set ID, get name, set name, get GPA, set GPA, with all the code that is needed, and I don't need to do anything now customized, like for example checking if the GPA is not negative, or maybe doing some other verification regarding to the name that should not be empty. Well, you can do whatever you want later on, but for now let's keep it simple. Let's add our constructor. I think even here we can create some constructors. Let's see, from replace constructor with builder. No, I can't remember exactly with extract superclass, extract interface, use method. Maybe is it from here? No. Anyway, I don't. I think I've seen it somewhere, and it means that you can. It can generate some constructors for you. But let's create our own. So I'm going to int ID, then string name, and then double GPA. And this dot ID is equal to ID. This dot name equal to name, and this dot GPA is equal to GPA. This is the testing, and this is the student. I'm going to declare an instance of student. S is equal to new student. First of all, I just would like you to realize that if I'm using something like this, you remember this was a problem? What is the problem here? Student, constructor student in class student cannot be applied to given types. Required int string double, and it was found no arguments. And you don't have anyone with no arguments in here. So that's why once you specify your own constructor that has more arguments, then the default one with no arguments is not going to be available anymore. So yeah. Now I need to give my own, and for example, okay, so let's see. Actually, we said that we're going to see the address of the student. It's compiling, running, and let's have a look at the build. So let's look at this. Actually, it gave me more information than just the address. First of all, it gave me the name of the package. You see this package over there? So this is the name of that package. And then after the name of that package, there's this dot and then student. This is the class name. So it gave me which package and which class this is all about. This is the data type. And after the @ this is the address. And of course, remember, this address is in hexadecimal. And if I'd like to convert that, we can always go to this programmer and specify this hexadecimal. Maybe just paste, and if I'd like to convert it to decimal, so this is the value. So if I have like these boxes in my memory, each box has a number. So this is this student that I just created. This object S is in the box number 31,168,322. So this is the number of just a number of a box. So it doesn't show anything about the ID and things. So if I'd like to change this, if I'd like to change this behavior, for example, if I'm doing something like this, I just would like to see something that says student ID, for example. Well, what I need to do is to have this public string toString. This is how I should define that. Public string toString, and then I need to return something which is a string. And what am I returning? Let's say I'm saying student ID is equal to plus ID. Okay? So what you expect now to see if I'm running this program is the same code. I'm putting the same S, except now I'm seeing something customized than just rather seeing just the address. So I changed the way this S is displayed. And this is the role of this toString. Actually, there's a warning here. I mean, this is not a warning, this is just some sort of suggestion. It's better to add it so you don't have that warning, because actually this override means something in the object-oriented programming which is related to inheritance, which is something that is out of the scope of this course. So even if you don't use it, it's not a problem. It is going to work. As you have seen, it's still working. If I'd like this to be something else, just ID, for example, equal or something like that, now I just can define my own and specify whatever I'd like to specify. So the toString is a very simple way to display something I'd like to see when I'm just calling I'm trying to just display the object itself. So when I'm using this toString now with that, for example, with this implementation, I'm going to see name space ID space GPA, whatever. So it's just up to me who is defining that method to specify how it will look like. And this is the complete class with the constructor that takes 3 arguments, the other constructor that takes only 2, with the boolean equals that takes another student and compare the ID and everything, and then this toString which just returns something, and then we have this set get and for set name get GPA, for example, and that's it.